All righty, let's see here. Good morning. It's 8 a.m. and we want to be respectful of your time. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Senate Appropriations meeting, as we will consider the one bill on our agenda, which is House Bill 19 by Speaker Burns. Before we get started, if it's okay with the rest of the members, I've asked our chairman of the Ethics Committee, Senator Burns, if he'd lead us in an invocation.
If you'll join me, please, in prayer. Father, we're grateful for days that start early. We're grateful for challenges that you provide wisdom to deal with. We ask that you bless this committee with wisdom and patience as we consider the business of the state of Georgia. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I guess I should have, hold on for 1 second. Just needed to check and make sure we had a quorum. The first item on the agenda will be to approve the rules for the FY 23-24 session. The rules are in your book. They're the same as last year's with one change. We had a change to the number of which constitutes a quorum. It's currently 14 members. If you have a second to look over those, and afterwards we'll take a motion at the appropriate time. Senator Beach.
Move to approve.
Move to pass by Senator Beach. Is there a second? Second by Senator Payne. All those in favor, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we have the set of rules. The next item on the agenda will be House Bill 18, the FY 23 amended budget. Let me start off by saying it's an honor to work on the budget and be involved in the budget process. I know that so many of you are involved from the beginning. I want to take a second to thank you and also to walk you through the budget process generally. First, let's need to tell the House thank you. This is their conference room and they are always so kind as to allow us to use it for this purpose as we have a larger committee. We also would need to thank the staff. You see the folks sitting behind you and to my right. The Senate Budget Office staff is a team of extreme professionals who spend all year focused on this document, and the document will pass, and the document will pass later on this year, making sure it's implemented and then planning for the next. The budget cycles never end, and as my good friend in the back, Teresa McCartney, will tell you, there's 3 budgets running at some times of the year, and our budget team and our friends at the House Budget Office, Budget and Research Office, and OPB keep those running in a professional manner so that we can do what we do for our constituents. So I just wanted to say publicly thank you to our budget team for what you've done to get us to where we are here today. I also need to thank the subcommittees and subcommittee chairs. All of you serve on at least 2 subcommittees. The subcommittee work is what actually forms and develops the budget, the Senate's substitute that you'll see here today. Thank you for your work previously, and subcommittee chairs, thank you for your diligent work over the past now 21 legislative days to help us reach this point. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank our friends in the House for their work previously and our friends at OPB who get the first cracks at these budgets, and we kind of get to do some of the cleanup work. Let me walk you through how the budget process works. Many of you in this room know, but some looking online or watching online maybe don't understand this process. Usually in late summer, the governor will send out budget instructions for agencies to adhere to and make plans for their next 12 to 18 months of a budget year. After the agencies bring back their reports, OPB skims through these all except for 2. They don't skim over the legislative ads and they don't skim over the court ads. Those are separate branches, but anything in the executive branch does get skimmed over by OPB first. And late in November, sometimes early December, OPB will develop what you see and have before you, the governor's budget report. They will print this usually the first week of January, and by law, by the 5th day of the legislative session, it's presented to us as the governor's recommendations for what he believes our priorities ought to be for the next fiscal year and the amended fiscal year. The House will then take the governor's budget proposals and turn them into a bill. That's what we had before us previously, House Bill 18. They'll put their fingerprints on it. That's what's before us now. And then we get our turn afterwards to put our fingerprints on it. And that's the committee substitute that you see and we'll vote on hopefully later this morning. Like normal legislation, when you're carrying your own bill, the bill becomes special to you. It becomes it becomes your baby, we would say. And when people change things about it or maybe don't like it or vote differently on it, it bothers you. It sometimes becomes personal. No one wants to hear the old phrase is that their baby's ugly. But what we have to remember, particularly with the budget, is that this is not our bill, and these are not our funds. These are taxpayer funds, and we are accountable for them as stewards. Sometimes that leads us to ask hard questions, but the hard questions are never personal. We work to find agreement with our colleagues in this committee, across the hall, and even on the second floor. And where we disagree on the very few times that we do, it's for reasons of policy or information, not personally. We take our jobs and our duties seriously for our state and for our constituents, the taxpayers back home who foot this bill. With that opening, let me run you through House Bill 18, FY23, as amended by the Senate, or by the Senate subcommittee. FY23's amended budget is a $32.5 billion budget. That's an increase of about $2.3 billion or $1.9 billion in state general funds, or an increase of roughly 6.8%. If you look at inflation over the past 12 months, inflation's ran at about 6.5%. If you look at inflation over 2021, that's been about 7%. So a 6.8% increase is in line with what we've seen inflation do. The governor had three really big items I want to talk about early. They total $3 billion, and they're going to be reflected in the Senate's budget as well. $3 billion for tax relief and inflation relief measures. That's plans for a rebate or a refund to Georgia income taxpayers of roughly $1 billion. A $1 billion homeowner tax relief grant that is supported in House Bill 18 and supported by the Senate. And well over $1 billion to backfill motor fuel funds that were suspended over the past fiscal year due to record high inflation, and to give everyday Georgians and businesses alike a little bit of relief at the pump. The governor's items also included in his budget recommendation funds for support of school safety at $50,000 and to support stemming learning loss at $25 million. The Senate's proposal is going to endorse those measures as well. The governor included funds for the public health emergency pandemic unwinding. As you know, the federal government has now moved to say that the pandemic health emergency will be over in April. When that happens, you'll see a drop of our corresponding funds related to Medicaid. We have to prepare also to reevaluate anyone who receives most federal benefits, whether those be SNAP benefits, EBT benefits, or Medicaid. The governor's budget included funds that the Senate will support to do that, and even more from the Senate side. The governor's budget included $424 million in the amended process to shore up our state health benefit system. As you know, for years we've kept rates for employees artificially low, particularly in teachers and in school systems. We're about to have to work on that, not on the employee side, but on the employer side. And the governor's budget includes $424 million to shore up our portion of that, and the Senate will support it. We also worked where we could to find agreement with our colleagues in the House. We've supported and added to their commitments at the St. Francis Hospital, really encouraged by the awesome things that are going on there in Columbus. We've agreed and doubled down on several of commitments, including the House commitments to transportation and airport aid and rail, the same at corrections, and in their support of our state retirees. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment here and tell the House thank you for one other thing that they did in their budget. We appreciate their support of our initiative to end hoteling. It's been a Senate priority for now over 3 years. The House put substantial funds, $5 million, into out-of-home care, which is the program item where you would support ending hoteling. And the Senate budget will double down on that as well. But we appreciate our colleagues in the House for adopting our initiative and helping us end this practice that's not, one, it's financially not feasible for us, but second of all, it's just not the best place that we should be caring for these youth who are our wards. talked about our agreements, but we wouldn't be the Senate if we didn't have a few areas where we do disagree. And I want to walk you through those now. If you start at section 1 on the Senate, you'd see that we do have $541,000 in ads for legislative operations. That's just to keep in parity with the ads also made at the House. At the Judicial Commission, you'll see we reduced funds by about 15, we added back a few funds for legal counsel, trying to help back with some things going on at the Judicial Commission in this period in time. At juvenile courts, the Senate comes back $250,000, reducing funds due to utilization and reporting levels concerning the dependency case backlog. If you remember last year, we provided $5,000 grants to juvenile court judges if they could show that their case backlog concerning dependency cases was less than 360 days. It's 180 days roughly for the case. We gave them an additional 180 days after that. We had 50 judges who did not take us up on that offer to report those numbers, and so we combed back $250,000 commensurately. The Senate reversed the changes that the House made at the State Accounting Office and the Department of Administrative Affairs. Those were due to a spread issue. It isn't that we don't support those. It's just when you spread those funds over those two agencies, you have to spread it through all agencies, and it's probably something we can better do in the FY24 budget. The Senate agreed with the governor and reversed the House changes at the Georgia Technology Authority. You may remember that the Georgia Professional Standards Commission had $3.5 million that had been moved to GTA to support a certain task relating to licensing for teachers. The House moved that back. We moved it back and agreed with the governor on that position. At the Department of Ag, we essentially agreed with all the House changes, but we did have to move some of the funds into different programming areas after additional information came from the Department of Ag. At DBHDD, the Senate insisted on its position to separate respite care. We believe that having respite care and funding respite care allows our citizens with adult developmental disabilities to stay in their homes longer with family support. And so the Senate again separated out, disagreed with the House, moved back to the governor's position on separating out funding for respite care. We also insisted that operational personnel support for the federal opioid settlement come from the opioid funds, not from state general funds, moved back to the governor's position on that. And in the direct care support services concerning a patient treatment mall in the Columbia-Richmond County area, the Senate agrees with the project, but not with the funding level. The House funded half. Because of how late we think we will be in the fiscal year, we funded $500,000 towards that cost, but we are supportive of the project. In the Department of Community Affairs, the Senate added $100,000 to increase accessibility to an integrated website concerning the Department of Community Affairs and its grant processes. We also added $1 million for one-time funding, match funding for a community arts and education center in Louds County. In 1 Georgia, you'll see where the Senate disagreed with the $5 million added in pulled out of 1 Georgia for the Georgia Tech project. Remember, Georgia Tech has applied for a federal grant, $65 million matching. We have to have $5 million on our side. The Senate's going to support the project, but you're going to see that move to the Board of Regents and funded there in a special funding initiative, not out of the 1 Georgia fund, funded instead in Regents with state general funds. We also disagreed with the House on moving some of the unutilized grants, and we increased funding to the 1 Georgia Authority. At the Department of Community Health, we had some different numbers on Medicaid, and so the Senate numbers look a little different there. And we also had a disagreement on the process, for how we should fund a phase-in concerning the local portion of local employer portion, the state school system portion of the state health benefit plan match. What the Senate did do in DCH, though, on a large ad, was that we doubled down on the grants for the nursing program expansions. Those are funded right now at $3 million in the base under the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce for undergraduate medical education. $3 million's in the base. The Senate added $3.5 million to more than double the base. There were $15 million of applications roughly for nursing programs and nursing program expansions, so this allows us to pay almost half of those. They were in the middle of the grant process, so we don't have to run a new grant. We can just literally move the cut line. In the Department of Corrections, I've already told you the governor had significant ads here, the House had significant ads, the Senate added on top of the House's ads, but all of these additions are related to safety and technology through safety, or safety through technology, both inside the prison to protect issues we have going on in there and to protect the public at large outside of the prison. The Senate moved $8 million of lottery funds to the Department of Early Care and Learning to support what you have already heard the senator from the 4th strong initiative on third grade reading. Our thoughts here is if we can help on the pre-K level, getting students reading even faster, or being able to afford folks to read to them, that perhaps we can do an even better job and throw everything we have at tackling that third grade reading level. In the Department of Economic Development, the Senate reclaimed funds not spent for an appropriated purpose in the film, music, and video category at $1 million. And we agreed to support the Georgia World Congress Center and the Savannah Convention Center at their requested amounts. In the Department of Education, the Senate supported the governor's ads to school safety and also supported the governor's position on learning loss. We then doubled down on increasing funds for matching funds for school systems to implement character education programming, mainly in Middle Georgia, but we'd love to see that spread across our state. The Senate's proposal increases funds to provide a one-time benefit adjustment to retired state employees to the tune of $24.5 million. And the Senate's proposal also goes into the GEMA budget and increases funds for gang-related analytics and repeat offender solutions. That was $1.5 million. The Senate had an additional ad at GEMA for the beginning implementation of the cybersecurity force and technology and operations related thereto at $1 million. In the Department of Human Services, the Senate had an ad of $4 million for technology improvements and security upgrades related to federally provided benefits. You may have heard some of our constituents said that our EBT cards have been skimmed and scammed. They've ended up seeing their funds being spent in other states. There's a change we can make there, and we're already working with MasterCard, Visa, and others to help make those cards more secure, but there will be a cost associated to the state of roughly $4 million. I've already talked about the out-of-home care that the House plussed up by $5 million. We moved it to $10 million in increases for the amended budget. Again, working to end the scourge of hoteling for youth across our state. The DHS budget also had an ad of $100,000 for support of grandparent-led families. The Senate's budget concerning the GBI in Section 30 has a $500,000 ad for the GCIC program. You saw funding come off there with the reduction of our concealed carry permits, or making that no longer mandatory. So we had to add a $500,000 back there. We also are hoping that we're working with the GBI and GCIC to have them more involved in the criminal data exchange program. Also in Section 30 concerning the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, the Senate added $8 million for a fund increase for the Georgia Crime Victims Emergency Fund and $4 million for one-time funding for domestic violence shelters and sexual assault centers. At the Department of Labor, the Senate had ads for emergency capital maintenance, a roof, and a major boiler air conditioning issue over there. And at the Department of Law, the Senate supported staff recruitment and intention fund increases. At the Department of Natural Resources, the Senate has ads of roughly $11 million for parks, recreations, and historic sites. We also, moving down into the Georgia Building Authority, supported the governor's demolition project at $15 million, the same level as the House, with an additional $5 million added in funds specifically dedicated to demolition of facilities at USG institutions. In the Department of Public Health, the Senate reclaimed funds related to the Georgia Coordinating Center. That's a little over $6 million. And at the Public Service Commission, we had a few changes as well. We had a slightly better number concerning ongoing legal costs related to their lawsuit, is about $70,000, $80,000 less than the House number. And the Senate funded 1/4 of the security funds increase, again recognizing by the time this budget passes that we'll only have 1/4 of the year left. The Senate was able to support the rest of the Public Service Commission requests. At the Board of Regents, the Senate has ads of $5 million at Cooperative Extension Services. And we were able to make a couple of moves here that I want to explain. It's a bond move. You'll see at the Georgia Research Alliance, $5 million, and then down in the teaching formula, $3.7 million at Georgia Gwinnett, and $6.2 million at Ag Hill at UGA. Those are just bonds that were funded by the governor in the FY24 budget that we were able to pull forward into the 23 budget. I guess now would be a good time for me to tell you, as good a time of any, is that we feel like we have more flexibility in the 23 budget than we're going to have in the 24 budget. That's somewhat code word for telling you if you think the 23 budget was difficult, the 24 budget will likely be harder. So that's why we wanted to go ahead and move those funds forward now to free up moves or free up bonds if we could in the FY24 budget. You'll also see at the Public Service Special Funding Initiatives, the $5 million I mentioned previously for Georgia Tech. We used state general funds instead of using one Georgia funds for that. In the Secretary of State's office, we had a different position related to the UPS equipment. We funded $1 million where the House had funded $4 million of those. The Senate's position was we don't need to replace all of these at one time. Let's replace these power units, their backup power units essentially, as they go out rather than replace them all at once. We also were able, it's still in the Secretary of State's budget, but related to the Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission, we were able to support the Medical Cannabis Commission, but at a lesser number due to, we don't think they're going to need that much equipment right now due to the licenses that have already been released. The Student Finance Commission, you'll see some changes there, but those are related mostly to more updated projections. And then our move of HOPE grant funds, the $8 million out that you saw reflected in decal when we were talking about the getting students reading earlier. At the TCSG institutions, you'll see several moves in technical education. Those are bonds to cash moves as well. Rather than waiting for the 24 budget to bond the Georgia Industrial Robotics Training Center at Ogeechee Tech, we moved that to cash funds, $19.9 million, and moved the equipment of $8 million from bonds to cash in TCSG. TCSG, we also held to the House position and funded one Quick Start Center in Bryan County at $56.25 million. In the transportation budget, you'll see that the Senate, as I already mentioned, more than doubled down on its increases for airport aid and doubled down on its increases for rail. We think those are going to be important for our freight corridors and expect even more there in the future. We also added $50 million in capital construction projects for increased funds associated with transportation infrastructure needed to help move people, items, and goods at the large economic development project in Bryan County. When we have these big announcements, we're very, very proud of them, but we do realize that sometimes it causes effects in other areas of the budget, and we want to be able to support those as well as supporting the additions that we have at REBA and TCSG. One other transit move, we had previously appropriated transit funds to another project that looks like it may not be as high on a priority due to an economic announcement that was no longer going forward. So the Senate took and reallocated $3 million of prior state general funds from that project to a transit project for ferries in the Chatham County area. Last and certainly not least, Section 48, our veterans. The Senate's budget includes $750,000 to increase funds for a military families medical health clinic. That'll be located in Liberty County. It's a public-private partnership with another foundation that is very much devoted to the mental health of our military families. We hope this project goes well. It's strongly supported by the House and by the Lieutenant Governor's office. And we want to see this project not only succeed in Liberty County, but we hope it's something that we can duplicate at our other military facilities around the state. I've walked you through the differences, but again, I want to carry you back to the beginning of where we started on the areas where we agree. When the governor gives his budget, his highlights, he actually on page 9 and 10 lists budget highlights for the amended FY23 budget. The Senate's proposal of these, first of all, there's 30 listed if you break them down. The Senate's proposal meets or exceeds the governor's position on 27 of those. That's 90%. So we work very hard to find agreement and to find consensus where we can, and we're so glad we were able to find that on over 90% of the governor's ads. On the House's ads, we were able to find consensus on almost as many as well. A few differences there, which is always the case when they think we're their little brother and we think that we're their big brother. You know, there's some differences from time to time. But I tell you that to say that I believe the FY23 process is going to move extremely smoothly. We've been able to work with our partners across the hall, with our partners on the second floor, and to develop a budget that includes so many of your priorities. The priorities you brought out of subcommittee, the priorities you brought on specific Senate requests for your district. And as we move forward in this process, we're going to continue listening to you. The budget is not done, as you know, until it's signed by the governor. So as we go through this process more, if there's things you see that you think we need to tweak, please don't hesitate to bring them. If there are things you think we need to tweak more in the 24 budget, please get those to us as quickly as possible. Your time, your efforts, and your energy, we hope, are reflected in the document that you now see before you. I appreciate the time, the sweat, and the sometimes tears that you put into developing this and getting us here today. Thank you for allowing me to help lead and sort of coordinate this process, but I'm not at all blind to think that this is my budget. I know it's your budget. I know it reflects your priorities, and I appreciate you allowing me to help you head it up and get it to where we are now. That being said, are there any questions? Senator again.
Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, we'll ask for a motion to pass.
All right. If there are no other questions, we'll take this motion. Any other questions? Motion do pass by Senator Guillen. Second. I think the senator from the 30th beat you to it. Senator seconded by Senator Dugan from the 30th. Any further discussion? All those in favor of passing House Bill 18 by committee substitute, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And it passes. There's no other items on the agenda. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you later on this morning.